Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ramble in the Jungle. I am Arvind, and as usual, we have Akash. What's up, Akash?
What's up, man? It's good Sunday morning. Pretty crushing defeat last night, FA Cup final. But
We
it's
support
a new
Chelsea,
day.
right?
Yes. But
Well, I
so
don't
I
think
mean,
you
it
do.
happens. It's okay. But it's a new day. It's a new morning, and we'll make it a good day by having a good conversation about hopefully a good book.
Yes, definitely. So the book for this week is called Moth Smoke by Mohsin Hamid. I hope I pronounced the name right. It is a book suggested by you. So this is a book. It's a novel by this British Pakistani novelist. Uh, so I read the summary and you have read the book. So the summary, it seemed interesting, but like I was telling you earlier, like before the call, uh, the subject of the novel, that these kind of subjects is something that I don't personally enjoy reading, but you attested to uh, the style of writing and how you enjoyed it. So I'm very curious to know more about it. So why don't you give the audience a summary of the book if you can?
Sure. So, Mohsin Hamid has written a lot of books catering to the Asian audience, both Pakistani, Indian, as well as other parts of Asia. He's written most of his books are not really set in a particular country, or he leaves that very vague. But by growing up in Asia or any part of Asia, you know immediately that this can only be in your continent and not anywhere else. And this is certainly a book like this, although this is very specifically written or sort of based out of Lahore, Pakistan, and by the socio-economic and political happenings in the book to the protagonist. You
Hmm.
know that it's somewhere close to 1999, where before the Kargil war, before the nuclear tests, or during the nuclear tests in Pakistan as well as in India, and it was like two nuclear powered countries were on the verge of war, which was the first time it ever happened. It would have happened since the World War, since World War II. So it was a pivotal time for both countries. But he didn't focus on that, although that was the setting and that was sort of the atmosphere that was going through Lahore, as well as other Pakistani cities and other Indian cities. But what he focused on is the decline of a man who was, I would say, destined for a lot of good things or great things, both in terms of his athletic career as well as his academic career. So he was a pretty good boxer as a youngster, and that was a way he would defend himself. That was a way he would hide away a lot of problems. And he was also an astute economics student. He was pursuing his PhD, and the entire story, as the country is delving into chaos, as the as the people who can take care of themselves and swap out, say, Pakistani rupees for dollar bills because the country is going into sort of chaos, they're well off. And he's sort of in the middle of it because his friends are all of these rich and wealthy people, but he's not a rich and wealthy person himself. And so he descends into chaos, and even in the back of the book, um, it's written, this is the story of his decline, and it is very much so. But as we have seen in stories of decline or stories of triumph, right, of anyone, it doesn't happen with one decision. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens through successive steps or successive decisions which you take correctly or incorrectly. And in this story, he's taken several steps incorrectly at the start of the book, and he ends up at the bottom of his decline at the end of the book.
Hmm. Very interesting. I mean, this story of, a man uh, who had everything and then sort of declined gradually. It's a story that has been told a lot of times in a lot of different ways. But in what I'm interested in is how the political setting, like you described, how does that play into the decision making of the protagonist? Does that even play a role, or how is the connection to that?
So it's interesting because the entire situation in the country is I would say confusing, because there are tests going on, right? There are nuclear tests going on, and in or close to Lahore, and yeah, his literally his ceiling rattles and sort of his light goes out because they have to save energy to send it to the nuclear reactors or something. I'm not sure how that works, but his electricity is cut off. um, he hears these rumblings throughout the day. Everybody is in despair. There is no economic opportunity in the country. So there is an air of desperation, especially from the middle and lower class people, right? And that is not the same that is affecting his friends, the upper class people, right? Because they're secure in their jobs, because their jobs aren't dependent on the country. It's dependent on either diplomatic ties with other countries, or they're just based out of other countries and they just live in Lahore because it's cheap. And that's the case with a lot of even Indians who live in Indian cities. So there is a clear differentiation between um, the people who are tied to the city, to the country, and the people who aren't. And this comes out very clearly because the two people he most associates with. So the protagonist's name in this case is, and this is very interesting as well, right? The protagonist's name in this case is Dara Shikoh,
Okay.
which based on history was the eldest son of Shah Jahan, the obviously the man who architected or at least created the Taj Mahal. um, and uh, and and the but his Dara Shikoh was supposed to be, as history goes, Dara Shikoh was supposed to be the next in line after Shah Jahan died, because he was the eldest son. But that wasn't the case. That was given to his youngest son, or one of his younger sons, Aurangzeb. Um, and the antagonist's name in this book is Aurangzeb, right?
Okay.
And the funny thing is that the love interest in this entire story is Mumtaz, who was obviously, as Mumtaz Mahal
Wow.
goes, Taj Mahal was the wife of Shah Jahan, right?
Mhm.
So there's a little overlap between history, and it trails the story of the protagonist and the antagonist very well,
Mhm.
right? So a little snippet that is there in the first chapter of the book as well is Aurangzeb imprisoned Shah Jahan in his own sort of palace, and took over the reins of king, and he delivered to his father the head of his eldest son, Dara Shikoh.
Mhm.
And the protagonist in this case, in modern day Lahore, or at least 1999 Lahore, is Dara, called he's referred to as Daru fondly by his friends. So Daru has a very awkward place in society because, as I said, he's in both rings, right? Like he can see the lower class people and he can see the upper class people. His best friend is this guy named Aurangzeb, funnily enough, but he's called Ozi by his friends. And a person he associates with most often is an auto rickshaw driver named Murad.
Mhm.
So he spends his time between these two people, right? When he has nothing to do, and obviously one doesn't know that the other he's associating with the other, because you don't want them to
Mhm.
know that. And he sees how certain people are taking advantage of the socioeconomic status of the country by getting wealthier, and not because of hard work, but because they have certain connections, and there are certain people in this country who are who have to who are forcing themselves to resort to illegal ways of gaining money because they have no other way of doing it legally.
Very interesting, and that sort of a thing, I think, unfortunately, it exists even today, right? Especially in the regions near Lahore, and in Kashmir, where people who who have that sort of an affluence and influence, they are they have an unfair advantage over the people in the same area who might be who might be coming under the reign of violence over there. So my other question was this, like you said, this is a story of uh, his decline, um, but is there like a moment of redemption? Is there, like, towards the end, or is it just a portrayal of a man in decline?
So there is some sort of redemption, but there's redemption in his head, right, where he thinks
Okay.
that he is being uh, he's taking one back for the little guy, so to speak, right? And uh, that is done in a way where it continues his decline, which is again a very interestingly sort of that is an attribute of the writer himself, the way he sort of intertwined this with where Daru thinks that, where the protagonist thinks that, yes, I'm this is a win for me, but it isn't, right? So a key part of the story is the fact that and again, this is a spoiler, so if you want to watch it, if you want to read the book, then just pause this podcast right there and avoid the spoiler. But the protagonist, Dara Shikoh, right, is having an affair with his best friend's wife, and he thinks that this is the way that I'm getting back at him and all of that. But this is sort of deepening the whole of his decline, because not only is he sort of having an affair, but in order to convince himself that this is the right thing that I'm doing, I'm getting one back for sort of my clan, or my group of people, is he's trying to subdue himself by taking certain drugs, right? So in I think in Pakistan there's like this free reign of heroin. There's a lot of heroin problems there, especially on the streets, like there is in a lot of cities, but more so there. Um, and he sort of gets these heroin. I don't know how heroin is consumed, but he sort of mixes it with hash and he tries to smoke it. Um, and this is done to sort of lull his senses, so that he feels like, oh, what I'm doing is correct, what I'm doing is righteous to a point, right? Because like he's basically taken everything away from me, and now I'm going to take the one thing that is precious for him, to him, and that is my triumph.
Hmm. I mean, that the moral dilemma is something. I, uh, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the statistics or the data, but usually among the drug users, certainly there is that sort of that internal pain that maybe they aren't, uh, they can't articulate, right? And here also we see that he has that moral dilemma of if he's doing the right thing, because what if he is not doing the right thing, and what if he's not doing the thing or getting the thing out of it like he hoped it would. So yeah, so drug is the easy way out, right? And that's what we've seen across a lot of things, right? And my question is how, uh, I'm not sure about the author himself, but how, like, what are the religious sort of implications that has been given in the book? Like, is Daru like a has he been described as a religious man, or his friends?
That's an interesting question, because we've seen that certain religions are uh, I mean, certain religions do not. I mean, they abstain from certain forms of intoxication. Obviously, Islam is one
Mm,
of those where
yes.
people don't consume any sort of alcohol, and there are
So
certain other religions
more than
where
that, my question was because, one thing that I've noticed is, and you might have as well, is when there are such moral dilemmas in a person, if they are a religious person, they resort to religion, right? Uh, but sometimes, yes, even if the person is religious and they know that they're going against their religion, that's when they sort of plunge into the evils of drugs, right? So
so we can look at this from the perspective of the setting more than anything else, right? Like if we were, and this might be slight sort of reading too much into it, but the entire setting is caused, or the entire economic catastrophe, at least on the other side of the border, was caused because there were nuclear tests going on and all of the
Mm.
resources in the country were to be directed there.
Yes.
And one of the main things with the nuclear test was that, or at least the pre-existing problem in tensions between the two countries, was a matter of everything else, but also of religion, right?
Mm.
So you would expect or see that, if you're a religiously astute person in a country where it's descending into some sort of a religious war, you would support not just your country but your religion and say that it's okay, we're in this economic catastrophe, it's better for our religion, we'll come out better.
Mm.
But he wasn't of that opinion. He wanted economic prosperity, at least some sort of economic prosperity, right? And the author is very clearly sort of intertwined this with the story. And I'd just like to make this point. He said the main difference between the upper and the middle, the upper class and the lower class, at least in that time in Lahore, was it wasn't necessarily money, but it was a form of money that was only visible in the upper class, and that is air conditioning, right?
Okay.
So and I'm assuming Lahore is an incredibly hot place. I haven't been there, but I'm assuming it's an incredibly hot
Is
place.
it?
That's why they
I
prioritize.
always thought it was
It's
a.
close to Punjab, as in it's close to India's Punjab, and it is in Pakistan's Punjab. So I would imagine the winters to
Yeah,
be
maybe.
cold
Yeah.
and the summers to be really hot.
Yeah.
So this was written in the summer, so it was really, really hot. And the author says that think about air conditioning, right? Air conditioning is something that only the rich have and the poor desire. It's a thing that the rich have everywhere. They wake up in the morning in an air conditioned room. They sit in an air conditioned car, and they're in their own box, controlling their temperature. They feel like gods, and they head into an office which is air conditioned, only to do it all over again. That at no time do they ever step out and see what is happening in the country or feel the weather of the country itself where everybody else is living in. And obviously air conditioning is a huge electricity cost, right? Like, I mean, think about it in terms of pragmatics, and it's a huge electricity cost. And Daru, our protagonist, at the start of the book has lost his job, right? He was a bank officer, and he lost his job, and the first thing that was cut was air conditioning.
Mm.
And that's when he realized that, listen, I don't have money, right? And he used to go to his friends' houses just to sort of sit in air conditioning. uh, and that's a very telling statement, because it is largely true, and it does sort of delve into the economic impact of the people, right? If you have air conditioning, you are well off. If you don't, you need it.
Yeah. In a lot of places, the same thing is done with televisions. Like, if a person owns
Right.
a television, then especially a color television, like back in those days. Uh, but one other interesting thing that I noticed when you were giving the summary of the book and talking about the protagonist is that the air of nuclear testing in both countries, right? And this was the nuclear test happened in around 1998. Uh, and I think we were too young to feel that tension in the air. But I'm pretty sure that there was that tension in the air, and probably this environment of pessimism or nihilism in both the regions, because uh, Pakistan was testing, and the people to be worried were the North Indian, especially the regions of Kashmir, Punjab, and all those things, and Pakistan should be similarly the regions closest to India, which would be Lahore, where the story is set. So that sort of nihilism and the pessimism, uh, do you think that also played into uh, uh, the the frustration of the protagonist, or not frustration, like the that sense of impending doom, and maybe because of that, being in a being addicted to drugs or going down that spiral wouldn't matter so much because everything would anyway come to an end. Did you sense that sense that nihilism uh, in
Yeah,
the story?
yeah. I think that is if that has if anything has to be a takeaway, I
Hmm.
think that's what the title of the book eventually stands for as well, which is I mean, let's look at the title, right? Moth Smoke.
Hmm.
At least from the point of view of the protagonist, is a situation where he doesn't have air conditioning, he doesn't have lighting. Lights candles in order to sort of light up his house.
Hmm.
Um, and when it's hot and there are there's smoke and there's candles, and the entire city is sort of engulfed in darkness because all the electricity is directed towards the nuclear program. Moths are attracted towards the little bit of light that is there, right? And the little bit of light is, in this case, his candle in his house. And they fly too close to the flame,
Hmm.
and sometimes they get burnt. And the smoke that comes out of that is moth smoke,
Hmm.
right? Um, and he doesn't have anything to do because he doesn't have a television. He doesn't have a job to go to. He doesn't have friends to meet. So he sits at home and looks at these moths burning,
Hmm.
and he realizes that the situation that he's in, as you said, nihilistic situation,
Hmm.
is very similar to the moths, right? And the only piece of satisfaction he has, apart from obviously the affair that he's having, the only piece of satisfaction he has is looking at these moths, picking up his badminton racket and smacking them, right? Like he has nothing to do, right? He's like, might as well kill these birds. And that sense of nihilism also descends into his everyday life, where he starts consuming heroin, starts consuming hash and other drugs. He starts disassociating himself with his family members, with the remaining family members that he has left. He's at this time he's an orphan. He only has uncle and his grandparents around. He starts disassociating himself with them as well. Um, he realizes that there is no way to legally make money in this country because even though he's a incredibly smart man, he's halfway through his PhD, he can still
Hmm.
finish it.
Hmm.
He had a good sort of bank job, earning a decent amount of money, but he left all that and he never tried to get anything. He did try to an extent, but you need political connections to get by. So what's the point? And again, he thought that what's the point is a very nihilistic attitude, right? So he thought, what's the point of getting a job because I can't get one and I can't earn enough money and I can't stay in this city or this country because everybody else is going abroad. What's the point of living at least healthily without drugs because there's no other way to depress my the influence around me. Uh, what's the point of allowing these moths to live? Might as well smack them and kill them because that's the only entertainment I have. And at the end, what's the point of not doing something illegal because I need the money because I don't have air conditioning? And so he descends into crime, right? The auto driver, the auto rickshaw driver that we spoke about earlier, he sort of hatches a plan with him,
Hmm.
and he decides to rob a boutique, like a hair salon or something. And in that he commits a murder
Hmm. Wow.
because he has no level, no semblance of consequence, right? Like
Hmm.
my life is done. I'm in drugs. I just need money. I just need air conditioning. If I get that in the prison, I won't, but might as well try.
Hmm. And this sort of reminds me of the book, The White Tiger. I'm not sure if have you read it? The
Arvind Adika?
Yes, yes.
I don't like his first name. I don't know why.
Yeah, so this reminds me of. I mean, it's not the tension between the two countries. Nothing of that is there in that book. But it's a different book, and but it's a commentary on the class system in our country, and the whole thing that you told about murder. It is sort of portrayed in a similar way in that book, and it's a very interesting book. It's one of the first novels I read, actually. So yeah, it made me think about that, and it leads me to wondering about this question. This book was, as just looking up, it was published in the year 2000, just a couple of years after the nuclear tension between India and Pakistan. Uh, and I'm also thinking about the Cold War between America and Russia, and the books that came out during that era, and books like 1984, Lord of the Flies, two books that come to my mind. They have also been a bit pessimistic. A bit would be an understatement, but yes, pessimistic. But they do signal uh, of what is to come in the future. In 1984, and the way Orwell describes the having that big brother watching everyone, the Ministry of Truth, all those things. Is there some sort of prophecy that you sort of found in the book that might have based on this nihilistic view that the book or the protagonist had? Did you sense that some sort of the author trying to prophesize something, some sort of doom in the future, or do you sense that that wasn't there?
I think it was more of a character analysis
Okay.
in the entire book, rather than a environment analysis, or rather than an outlook, right, for what's going to happen, and this is a sign that we can take forward. Um, I think the essence of the book was written in two ways, right? One was obviously the character of the person, in this case, the protagonist, as he saw the world,
Mm.
as he saw the world that he was living in, and the sort of situation that he was put in. And it was also how other people were viewing him, right?
Mm.
And that was very interesting, because it wasn't like, part A, part B, part A, B, A, B, A, B, right? And another interesting theme of this book is, and this was very beautifully written, and this is all credit goes to the author in this case, and not just the story, because there's only so much that the story can do. This is how you write it, that sort of brings this forth to a reader, where the love interest in this particular story, her name is Mumtaz.
Mm.
She was like a sort of anonymous, sort of pseudonymous journalist that writes these in-depth pieces on culture of in Pakistan, which goes by the name Zulfikar Mantu. And she's written on several things. She wrote on police rackets. She wrote on brothel owners. And this in this case, she wanted to write about uh, a man who went into his decline, as the story suggests, right? So, in the middle of every chapter, she sort of, as his story is progressing, it sort of breaks into an interview between Zulfikar Mantu and uh, um, an important part of the story, whether it's Aurangzeb, the auto driver, the Dara Shikoh's professor while he was in the PhD program, um, his uncle, etc. Right? So we see not just a man who is going into his decline from the character of himself, but a man who could have not been that, right? Who could have easily not been in that situation, taking those bad decisions, from the perspective of those around him,
Hmm.
right? So the way, I mean, you obviously everybody reads a book in a different way, and to each their own, but the way I sort of saw it is that at every point, uh, maybe in your life, maybe in whatever, you have several decisions, but you can sort of define these as a good and a bad decision.
Hmm.
And one will take you to your triumph and one will take you to your decline. And in this case, he knowingly or unknowingly or nihilistically took every decision that led to his decline, and it eventually did.
Hmm. Yeah. That's the beauty of fiction that I always admire. Uh, when people say that they don't like fiction, I often I'm taken aback because fiction has that power to sort of personify all these lessons that we need to sort of understand. And in nonfiction, I do enjoy nonfiction, but you can read a book about how a murder takes place, like what goes on in the mind, like a psychological analysis. Or you can read Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky and understand what the protagonist is going through, the way he describes. That's something I've always admired, and the power of an author to do that. It is something that it's a great skill to have. And even this book, I was at first, like I said, I thought I wouldn't enjoy it even after reading the summary, but after this conversation, I think I'll actually read the book. It seems very interesting. Do you think it will make a good movie?
It in fact would. I definitely think it would, because another book of this by the same author, by Mohsin Hamid, The Reluctant Fundamentalist, was made into a movie. I think it stars what's the guy who played the villain from Venom?
I haven't watched that.
That's it. Okay, I'm not sure, but he's that very Riz Ahmed, right? I think it's Riz Ahmed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So the Reluctant Fundamentalist is it's a slightly more popular book. It's a shorter book as well, and
From the
it
same
was made
author,
into a
right?
movie. Same author,
Yeah.
right? And it was made into a movie as well.
Oh,
And yeah, I could definitely see this being made into a movie, given the setting that's in. But it might be like a small indie, more sort of analysis
mhm.
movie rather than a hi-fi action movie or something
Yeah,
like
those
that.
are the movies I sort of enjoy as well. So I would definitely watch it. But yeah, I think we'd be sounding like fools if we were expecting a movie rather than reading the book. So yeah, definitely this is a. I mean, you sold me on the book. I know you weren't trying to. Just a conversation about it sort of
No,
changed.
I'm in talks with the author. I think the more people I sell, the more commission I get. So
That's
in
certainly
the
not true,
pocket.
and do not associate me with Akash's greed. Uh, uh, so, is there any other thing that you have to say about the book?
I think the writing was absolutely on point,
Hmm.
especially drawing the um, significance with the title. That's, I mean, I've read a few books by Mohsin Hamid, and it's the way he sort of intersperses the title with what the book exactly talks about, and talks about not just the problems with in any part of Asia, but sort of the struggling or the striving part of Asia, and he does it in a very nice sense and sort of scripts it with uh, several undertones, right? So in this case, the undertone is not just of the protagonist, but how the protagonist is seen by other people within his vicinity, how he descends into madness, how he descends into a decline, is is really nice to see, and something that I really enjoyed while reading the book.
Yeah, definitely. The writing, the gifts of the author. is something that we have to enjoy. And describing whatever you said, that descent into devastation, it is it takes skill. It takes skill to bring that emotion out in the reader, and it's obviously a great job done if you felt that way, and if any reader feels that way. So I think it was a good conversation about the book. If you, for the people who are listening, uh, if you're interested in the conversation, then you should definitely pick up the book and read it. And if you like that, then you can probably read other things from the author. And yes, we will be coming back with another book, or stories like this. And until then, keep rambling.